Today in World Geography, we're taking a look at Lesson 3, Life in Western Europe. We're found on page 350 in your textbook. Our objectives for today are to describe ethnic and language groups in Western Europe, to discuss religion, literature, music, and the arts in Western Europe, and to explain current challenges facing this Western Europe region. While we are reading today and watching this video, you'll need to be following along with your guided reading activity. There are two main sections to our lesson today. The first is people, places, and cultures, and the second is current challenges. So you can see that there are two main tasks that we're going to be doing accompanying our reading today. The very first is to use your textbook to label each of the concepts related to people, places, and cultures of Western Europe. So they give you the definition, and you're matching that up as you find these in your reading. And in the second section, current challenges, using your textbook to complete these statements about the current challenges facing Western European countries. So there's a portion of a statement or fact that's presented right from your text, and you're going to fill that in the best you can from the text itself. So you're searching for these individual statements and finding where you would fill in that information appropriately. As we get into our lesson today, make sure that you're following along to get that completed so it's done by the end of your reading. To our online textbook, I want to introduce you to something that's a little bit different compared to how we do school here in the United States. And I just want to show you the kind of different lifestyle and the different value people have on different things in different parts of the world, just so you understand that there are different ways of doing things. Here we're going to watch a video on how schools in Paris, France do their school lunch program, and you can compare it to how we do it here to try and provide you with a nutritious and beneficial meal each and every time, obviously, when we're in school. But here's what they're doing in Paris, France.
Every day has an hors d'oeuvre, a main course, the sauce that changes every day, the cheese that changes
That's the
every day.
menu for the lunch program at a public school in Paris. A 5-course meal for 3-year-olds. A menu not only given to parents so they know what their child is having for lunch, it even recommends what families should serve for that night's dinner.
You don't want your child to have fish for lunch and fish for dinner.
Vivian Walt is a writer for Time magazine, and her 3-year-old son goes to a public school in Paris. And her experience illustrates just how seriously the French schools approach meals. The menus are designed to provide a balanced meal, but also to introduce children to the tremendous variety of French cuisine. I was there the day they served bouillabaisse, and yeah, that's me in a bunny suit, because they go to extraordinary lengths for food safety. Each of the city's 20 school districts has a central kitchen like this, a high-tech, ultra-hygienic facility, because children, especially young children, are more susceptible to foodborne illnesses. They clean every bottle, every bag, every piece of fruit.
So there's nothing that leaves this place to the kitchen that has not been disinfected.
The meat, they were proud to tell me, not only born and raised, but
abattu en France.
which even in the U.S. is no guarantee of quality or safety. But in Parisian schools, they keep small samples of every meal for 2 months, just in case of any suspect illnesses. And in the U.S., schools generally offer vegetables at lunch, but children just don't eat them. Here, the dietitian isn't above deep frying the broccoli.
Une manière un petit peu cachée de leur faire manger des légumes.
But a bigger concern is the rise in childhood obesity, fueled partly, experts say, by the popularity of fast food.
C'est facile, c'est simple. Là, vous voyez que j'avais faim et finalement, je trouve que c'est assez pratique. On est servi rapidement.
One of the very first things that they will always tell you is about how Americans gobble their food. And it's one of the things that drives the French nuts about Americans.
Yeah, okay. But I went to City Hall to talk to the woman in charge of all the public schools in Paris. Rosai Colombe is her name. And she believes that eating is
also a pleasure because you share with your friends in school, your family at home, and you share some food, but you also share time, conversation, and this is also a point that is important to me.
Well, in a Parisian school, the lunch costs around $5, $6, and the family pays what they can afford. The city picks up the rest. But even in a small town 400 miles to the south of Paris, where the budget is about half that, the chef there insists.
C'est pas parce qu'ils n'ont pas le droit de vote qu'on va se foutre de leur gueule, quoi.
This is Dominique Valadier. He's the chef at a local high school, and he has to feed 800 students every day for the equivalent of about $2.50 a plate. It's ironic because 20 years ago, he was a chef at one of the biggest casinos on the Riviera.
J'ai servi la reine d'Angleterre. Ah ouais, elle a mangé du cassoulet, je m'en rappelle.
But he married a teacher, and when their schedules and vacations, never meshed, he left the Riviera and the Queen to cook for kids, but brought with him his passion for cuisine. He insists everything be made by hand. He refuses to take shortcuts, even making his own fish stock so that nothing goes to waste.
Et c'est bien meilleur, parce que ça a beaucoup de goût, beaucoup de force.
Most mornings he goes to the market.
Je cherche les légumes qui viennent d'ici, le plus possible.
The menu that day included roast beef, handmade ratatouille turnovers, carrot salad, and mussels, all fresh. And just as younger children are introduced to typical French cuisine, at this school, kids are eating escargot. Yeah, it's snails. One student even feels it's better than what he's getting at home.
At home, I eat the usual thing, normal things that everybody do, pasta, like pizza, and when you get here, it's very good for your health.
The French, as we know, are proud of their cuisine, which is why Vivian, you remember Vivian, well, when her son started nursery school, she'd signed him up for the lunch program, then decided maybe she'd bring him home, feed him, he could take a short nap. She neglected to tell the administration, and one day got a phone call requesting that she come to the school immediately.
I thought something was really wrong with my son. I ran out the door, I ran down the street, run up to her office, walk in, and she's sitting there with my file in front of her, and she says, "What does your son eat for lunch?" Because, of course, we had signed him up for the lunch program, and I had changed my mind without letting them know.
So Vivian agreed that her son would eat lunch at school every day and was sent home with a menu detailing what the child would be eating every day for the next 2 months.
This, to me, is a work of art. And these are 3-year-olds we're talking about.
While we're reading today, make sure you keep in mind the differences between what we experience here in the United States and some of the cultural aspects of what you see here in Western Europe. Obviously, you can tell the difference between how those things are kind of taken to the next level to provide for what they believe is the best experience for kids overall. Daily life in Western Europe, people, places, and cultures. Western Europe's great cities are major population centers. They are also historical landmarks and tourist attractions. National capitals such as London, Dublin, Berlin, and Paris are among the world's most famous cities. A changing world. Political events in the 1900s threatened all of Europe. In order to survive and compete in a changing world, the nations of Western Europe needed to learn to work together. When yet Western Europe began to rebuild after World War II, countries made efforts to cooperate. In April 1951, the Treaty of Paris called for the International Agency to supervise the coal and steel industries in France, West Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, and Italy. Those 6 nations then created the European Economic Community, or EEC, in 1958 to make trade among its member nations easier. The spirit of cooperation among these countries continued when they created the European Commission, or EC, in 1967. 2 more Western European nations, the United Kingdom and Ireland, joined the EC in 1971. By the late 1980s, Denmark, Greece, Spain, and Portugal had also joined, forming the European Union. Those 12 nations formed the European Union, or EU, in 1993, with one goal being to strengthen trade among countries of Europe. Member nations have control over their own political and economic decisions, but they also follow EU laws to regulate the use of natural resources and the release of pollutants. They also have agreements on law enforcement, and security. When the Soviets lost control of Eastern Europe in the late 1980s, those nations began forming their own governments. With the Soviet threat gone, Eastern Germany and Western Germany reunited. A united Germany became a strong voice in the EU. The European Union now has 27 members. 8 of those nations lie in Western Europe: Austria, Belgium, France, Germany, Ireland, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands, and the United Kingdom. You may have recently heard about a thing called Brexit, in which Britain was trying to leave the European Union so they could set themselves apart from these other 27 nations and run things themselves rather than under this entire umbrella. Ethnic and language groups. Celts, Saxons, Romans, Vikings, Visigoths, and others fought for dominance in ancient Western Europe. Those traditional ethnic divisions faded as the modern nations of Europe began to take shape. The people of a nation share a common language and a common history. Ethnic groups such as the French, the Germans, and the British rule entire countries. Their languages are the main languages of those nations. Western Europe is home to significant numbers of other ethnic groups who are minorities in other countries. Many are immigrants. They often speak in the language of their homeland, and they continue their own culture and way of life. Most people in the region speak one of the Indo-European languages. Indo-European is a family of related languages. It includes languages spoken in most of Europe, part of the worlds that were colonized by Europeans, Persia, India, and some other parts of Asia. Two major divisions of the Indo-European languages spoken in Western Europe are Romance and Germanic. Romance languages are based on Latin, the language of the Roman Empire. The most common Romance language in Western Europe is French. The Germanic languages spoken in Western Europe include German, Dutch, and English. Although about half of the English vocabulary comes from the Romance languages, not all Europeans are Indo-European. However, for example, Basque, a language spoken in the Pyrenees region of France and Spain, is unrelated to any other language spoken today. It is common for Western Europeans to speak more than one language, their native language in addition to English, French, or German. Now, if you notice the size of Europe and the European countries, they're much smaller in terms of their comparison to the size of the United States. Like the size of the individual countries here in Europe are similar to the size of what we have as states. So because we're so close to other states, it's like when you go to a different state, they speak a different language, but here you're talking about the difference between these countries speaking different languages. It's really common for people to be able to speak multiple languages in Europe because you're so close to other people and because those languages are related. They come from some of the same root words, so you can kind of transfer or decipher between what this word means in my language and what that word means in someone else's language. Religion in Western Europe. Romans accept Christianity, and Christian mission monks spread the religion during the Middle Ages. Christianity continues as Europeans' major religion. Germany was the birthplace of the Protestant Reformation, and Western Europe was the first place that Protestantism took hold. Today, most Western European Christians are either Catholic or Protestant. The Roman Catholic faith is strongest in France, Ireland, and Belgium. Protestant churches are the strongest in the United Kingdom and Germany. Immigration from Africa and Asia has brought many Muslims to Western Europe, especially to the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Austria, Netherlands, and Switzerland. Muslims followed the religion of Islam. World War II and the Holocaust nearly wiped out Europe's Jewish population, and today Europe's Jewish communities are growing in Western Europe, especially in France, the United Kingdom, and Germany. Literature and music. For centuries, Western Europe has been a world leader in the arts and culture. As European explorers spread European culture to other parts of the globe, the names of their greatest artists became known worldwide. England's William Shakespeare is one of the most famous playwrights in the world nearly 400 years after his death. The music of German and Austrian composers such as Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, Schubert is among the most important in all of classical music. The paintings of great artists from France, the Netherlands, and Belgium are among the most treasured in the world. The arts are an important part of Western European culture. Museums and cultural institutions celebrate each nation's art and history, and national governments support the arts. The German government, for example, funds hundreds of theaters and concerts and plays and attract large audiences. Most important is the influence Western European culture has had on the rest of the world. German architects from the Bauhaus School influenced buildings in the cities throughout the 1900s. British popular music and television have an impact especially on American culture. Daily life. The most popular team sport across Western Europe is football. The Americans call soccer. Professional leagues have formed throughout Western Europe. In the United Kingdom, cricket and rugby are popular team sports. Switzerland and Austria's rugged Alps and plentiful winter snow make mountain climbing, skating, downhill skiing, and cross-country skiing popular in both countries. Because so much of the population of Western Europe lives in cities, roads are crowded. Automobile traffic and pollution are extensive in parts of the region. In Switzerland, the traffic congestion has created serious air pollution in the Alpine valleys. To relieve congestion and address problems with pollution, much of Europe turned to high-speed rail travel. In many areas, tradition is part of the everyday lives. The people of Scotland and Wales, for example, take pride in their ancient languages, Scottish Gaelic in the Scotland and Welsh in Wales. These languages are taught in schools to keep their old cultures alive. Railways and highways. Europeans first began riding high-speed rail lines in France in 1981. France went out to build high-speed connecting all of its major cities. These trains travel at speeds up to 185 miles per hour. In the 1990s, the French high-speed rail lines began connecting to other high-speed rail lines from Paris to London via a tunnel beneath the English Channel, from Paris to the Netherlands, and from Paris to Brussels, Belgium. A well-developed highway system also links Europe's major cities. Germany's superhighways, called autobahns, are among Europe's best roads today. Many European countries are participating in the Forever Open Roads project. By combining efforts to develop innovative technology, the planners are working to transform the way roads are designed, built, and maintained in the 21st century. It's true that in Germany, the Autobahn does not have a speed limit. It's drive at your own risk. You can drive as fast as you want and you can't get pulled over, but there are serious regulations in terms of how you drive and where you're supposed to be, because those vehicles obviously have that freedom to drive as fast as they want. Education. Western Europe is one of the wealthiest, most urban, and well-educated regions in the world. In most of Western Europe, school is mandatory until students reach the age of 16, but many students then attend college. Western Europe contains some of the oldest and most renowned universities. Oxford University in England and the University of Paris opened their doors to students before 1200. Many universities started at this time after Pope Gregory issued a ruling calling for the creation of schools of education for the clergy. Hundreds of secular colleges, those without religious affiliation, were established by the 1400s. Current challenges. France, Germany, and the United Kingdom are not the military giants they were in the 1900s, but they still have some of the biggest economies in the world. A global financial crisis, however, has hurt the entire region since the early 2000s. Earning a living. Since the Industrial Revolution, improvements in agriculture have made it possible for fewer people to cultivate larger areas of land. Today, more than half the population of Western Europe lives in and work in cities. Even in France, Western Europe's leading agricultural nation, less than 4% of the workforce works in agriculture. In the past 2 decades, the number of industrial workers has also declined. Only about 25% of Western Europeans work in the industrial or secondary sector of the economy. Many more people are in the tertiary sector, which is the service industry. This sector includes government, education, healthcare, banking, and financial services, retail, computing, and repair of mechanical equipment. The United Kingdom was the birthplace of the modern industry, yet today only 18.2% of the workforce in the United Kingdom works in an industry. When the economy of a country depends more on services than it does on industry, the country is said to be post-industrial. Every nation in Western Europe has a post-industrial economy. Challenges. For hundreds of years, the nations of Western Europe were among the most powerful in the world. In 1900, Great Britain, France, and Germany ruled over empires that extended beyond Europe to Asia, Africa, and the Americas and the Pacific Islands. The 1900s was hard on Western Europe. The 2 world wars did extensive damage to nearly the entire region, then the Cold War kept Western Europe on the brink of war for more than 40 years. Even so, Germany, France, and the United Kingdom have been economically strong for a long time and remain among the 7 biggest economies in the world. The cooperation made possible by the European Union helps Western European nations compete with larger economies such as the United States, China, and Japan. For that to continue, the economies of all the EU member nations must be healthy. The global financial crisis of 2008, however, had an impact on all the European nations. Governments of the EU disagreed about how to deal with ongoing financial problems. Immigration brings change. The population of Western Europe is changing. Most population growth in Western Europe is caused by immigration. Many people come to Western Europe from Africa, Asia, and Eastern Europe looking for job opportunities or trying to escape political oppression. When they immigrate, they bring parts of their culture with them, including their religions. Germany, France, the Netherlands, and the United Kingdom each have large Muslim populations. The mix of European and immigrant cultures creates a rich, more diverse culture, but it also creates racial and religious tensions. To avoid these problems, some countries have attempted to restrict immigration. That finishes our reading for today. If you need to, go back to double check to fill in the blanks for the initial section of your guided reading activity and to answer the questions or to fill in the statements that are in that second section on current challenges. Thanks for tuning in. God's blessings.